Sound of love. They'd been married coming on 50 years now. Such was the thought that occurred to him one day, as Gerald sat at his writing desk in his study, smiling to himself as he listened to his wife pottering about in the kitchen through the open door and down the hallway. It always felt to him like the whole neighbourhood heard when his darling wife was in a particularly productive or creative mood, not a thing about her quiet or delicate. Gerald loved that about her. He'd grown up in such a quiet home, empty of noise or love, and his wonderful Doris couldn't be quiet or empty if she tried. He loved her singing as she cooked, her clattering as she organised and dusted, her dancing as she folded laundry, her humming as she sewed, her telling him all about the book she was reading on the walks in the park. Gerald himself was a painfully quiet man, most likely as a result of the way he grew up, and nothing made his heart softer than the happy sounds of his wife, so bursting with love and life that it simply could not be contained within her. He'd spent the majority of his life with this woman, and a better wife he couldn't have been blessed with, and a better life it couldn't have been. There were ups and downs, as come with every long and lived life, and every couple so opposite in so many ways, though the old saying that you get like the people you live with was most definitely had its basis in reality, to be sure. But life with his Doris is never dull, never lonely, and happily, never quiet. Gerald, as he is, can admit that sometimes he has a hard time saying how he feels about things, about his wife. It does not come naturally to him. But they know each other well enough, and having grown and loved together, to know that his habits are perhaps the embodiment of actions speak louder than words. He does readily return any and all verbal, and otherwise, of course, affections, but it is just not in his nature to express himself the way Doris does. Surly, some call him. Quietly, though, because Doris will defend him fiercely if she hears anyone insult her husband, and she is not a woman to be trifled with. His is a quiet kind of love. A hug and kiss every time he enters and leaves a room separate from her, a bouquet of her favourite flowers for her vase every time they come back into season, a lifetime of memories together built into the very walls and shelves of their home, love in each and every cupboard that holds Doris's many interests, a cute knick-knack here and there that she treasures. Doris knows him for what he is, and loves him despite, and because. They are both human and flawed, but they are best friends, always have been and always will be, and that is all they really need. Gerald pulls himself away from his writing desk, noticing that the ink is pooled on the page, and ruined the sentence he'd previously been thinking on before his sentimental musings got away from him. He sighs and scrunches up the paper, putting his writing away for another day, and gets up from his chair. He follows the sound of faint radio music crackling through the walls, and the wonderful scents he can now smell emanating from the kitchen. He stands in the door, a fond smile on his lips and crinkling his eyes as he watches Doris's hips move with the music, humming along under her breath as she puts the homemade bread in the oven to bake, something he remembers mentioning offhand that he'd been craving a few days ago. Doris had been reading at the time, and he hadn't been sure she'd even heard him, absorbed as she was. Clearly she had taken note and was now making it for him. Oh, how he loved her. Gerald comes up behind her, hugging her around her middle, barely avoiding being head-butted as she jumps with fright. She's always said he's too quiet when he enters the room. He tucks one hand to rest in the pocket of her apron, the other coming up to gently wipe off the smudge of flour on her cheek, where it had migrated from her hand and entire front. His messy sweetheart, he sees why she wears the apron. No words are said. The bread is in the oven and the dishes can wait. He'll help with them after they're done dancing for a while. He stays wrapped around her back, chin on her shoulder as they sway to the gentle music from the radio, Doris humming along, vibrating softly against his chest. They'd been married coming up on 50 years now. He's sure he knows the sounds of love now, and hopes to for many years more.